Welcome to Entrusted to Lead. I'm Danita Cummins. This is episode 2 of our Clarity season, which is an 8-week episode series on leadership clarity for complex seasons. So if you haven't already listened to episode 1 yet, I'd encourage you to start there. It's called Clarity is Not Certainty and Why That Changes Everything. And it lays the foundation for everything that we're exploring this season, which I'm super excited about. So last episode, we talked about the difference between clarity and certainty and why waiting for certainty keeps us stuck. So today, we're going to go a little bit deeper into one of the most common places that confusion shows up. And that question starts with this: what are you carrying right now that was never actually yours to begin with? Not the responsibilities you said yes to, not the things that genuinely belong in your hands, but the weight that you picked up somewhere along the way, which could be other people's emotions or problems you can't solve, or outcomes that you were never meant to carry. When we lack clarity about what's actually ours, we tend to pick up everything. And that's one of the fastest ways to lose the focus and the energy that we need for what God has actually placed in our hands. It's pretty simple math when you think about it. So today we're going to talk about how to name what's actually yours to carry and how to release what isn't. So grab your cup of coffee, friend, find a quiet corner, and let's get started. This pattern is so familiar that most of us don't even notice it anymore. It just feels like life, which is really hard, I know. It's the parent who absorbs their teenager's anxiety as if they can metabolize it for them, lying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, running through every possible scenario, trying to fix something that isn't theirs to fix. I've totally been there. Or maybe it's the spouse who carries their partner's disappointment about their career as if it's their own job to make somebody else's life feel meaningful or important. Or it could be the person at church who somehow became responsible for everyone else's spiritual temperature, organizing and checking in and holding it all together while they are quietly falling apart inside. And it's the friend who can't enjoy a quiet evening because they know someone in their circle is struggling, and if they're not actively doing something about it, they feel guilty. Or it could be the adult child who's been managing a parent's emotions since they were 12, and they don't even realize that they're still doing it at 43. Or it's the person who leads the small group, drives the carpool, keeps the household running. They show up for everybody around them, and then they are quietly wondering why they can't remember the last time they took a full breath. In each one of these moments, something has happened that we rarely stop to name. That person picked up something that wasn't theirs to carry, and they've been paying for it ever since. So here's what the cost of carrying things that aren't actually yours does to you. And I want you to listen closely because you might recognize yourself in this. It exhausts you. But not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. It's the kind of tired that settles into your bones. But that's because you are carrying weight that you were never built to bear. And there's no bottom to it. You can always find one more thing to pick up. Or it distracts you because your attention keeps drifting to things outside your actual reach. You're pouring energy into problems that aren't yours to solve, which means the things that are yours, your own heart, your own calling, your own peace of mind, those things, they get neglected. And it distorts how you see yourself because when you're carrying everybody else's weight, you start to measure your worth or your value by how well you manage everybody else's lives. And you can never manage them well enough. You just can't. And maybe the most damaging part of all of this, if we're honest, is that it keeps you from seeing what's actually happening inside you. I hear this all the time from people who reach out after listening to this podcast or when they've read Promise Over Purpose. They say something like, I don't even know what I'm feeling anymore. I just know that I'm tired. And when we start to untangle it, when they actually start to look inside everything or look at everything they're holding, so much of it was never theirs to begin with. They've absorbed other people's anxiety, or they've owned somebody else's choices, and they've taken on this emotional weight that existed way long before they ever got involved. And then they wonder why they feel like they're disappearing. So how do you figure out what's actually yours to carry? How do you distinguish between the things that genuinely belong in your hands and the ones that you need to gently set down? I want to give you 3 questions. Super simple ones because we like simple questions, but I want them to be honest ones. I want them to be the kind that create the clarity that you are willing to sit with these questions and ask and seek the answer. Okay? Question number 1 says, what can I actually influence? This is my most favorite power discussion. I just talked about this on a mentoring call with a friend of mine the other day. Notice I didn't say control. Almost nothing in our lives is within our complete control. We talked about that last week. But what you can influence, that's completely different. You can influence the atmosphere of your home. You can influence the words you speak over your children. You can influence whether you show up honestly in your relationships. You can influence your own choices, your own healing, and your own next step. But you cannot influence whether your adult child makes good decisions. You cannot influence whether your friend receives the help that they need. And you cannot influence your spouse's inner life or your parents' willingness to change. So when you take ownership of the things you cannot influence, you then set yourself up for a kind of failure that has no end. It just keeps going. So here's an example. I once spent years trying to hold something together for somebody that I loved. I adjusted and accommodated, and I poured myself out trying to make it work. And nothing changed because what needed to change wasn't something that I could reach. Their struggle had nothing to do with how hard I was trying. It had to do with something inside them that only God and their own willingness could touch. And that was never mine to fix. But I carried that burden for many years. And when I finally named that, when I could say out loud that I can influence how I show up, but I can't carry this person's inner journey, something in me exhaled for the first time in years. I stopped performing and started living. And the beautiful thing about this whole scenario is that the relationship got healthier. But not because I tried harder, but because I stopped trying to carry what wasn't mine. So here's question number 2. What did I actually agree to? This one is important because so many times we carry things that we never actually said yes to. Maybe you agreed to be a good parent, but you didn't agree to be responsible for your children's every emotion. Super valid. Or maybe you agreed to serve in church, but you didn't agree to become the emotional safety net for the entire congregation. Or maybe you agreed to be a faithful spouse, but you didn't agree to disappear in the process. Somewhere along the way, the scope expanded. The expectations shifted, and you started holding the weight that you never signed up for. But here's the thing that no one tells you, that just because someone hands you something doesn't mean it's yours. People will try to make their anxiety your responsibility, or their disappointment your fault, or their growth your burden. And you can love them deeply without owning what's theirs. I remember a conversation I had years ago with someone I trusted. I was drowning underneath what felt like this invisible 1,000-pound weight, and I was super frustrated because I felt like I was failing at all of the things. And she asked me a question I've never forgotten. She said, "Which of these did you actually choose?" And when I started to go down the list and look at them, for most of them, I hadn't chosen them at all. They were handed to me. Or, better yet, I had picked them up with this expectation that I absorbed them, or there were things that I thought that I needed and noticed and automatically made a choice to lead or control or be responsible for. But they weren't mine. They were never actually officially mine. They were just things that I'd collected along the way, things that I thought needed to be fixed. And then she asked, "And which of these do you agree to carry?" And that stopped me and made me really become super aware of what I had in my hand, and also realize that awareness is not the same as agreement. Just because I noticed a need doesn't mean that I am the one who needs to own it. And we feel like that a lot, especially for those who are in a position of service or leadership or stewardship, whatever word you want to use. But we feel that need or tension to set wrong things right. But I go back to leadership principles in the book of Nehemiah because I study the Old Testament a lot in this season of my life. All the lamenting and the prophets and all the things. But I go back to this scenario in Nehemiah where God calls them to rebuild the wall, but they were only called to rebuild the wall section that was right in front of their homes. And I think that is such a powerful image about our own hearts and our nature and the abilities that God has given us and where He has called us to, and how we miss it because we're so busy running over to our neighbor's house to build a wall that's in front of theirs or down the street or around the corner, that we forget that God placed us in one place. He put our 2 feet on the literal ground in some physical place in the world. This podcast reaches like 300 cities around the world. It's insane to me. I have no idea where you are today listening to this podcast. It's super humbling, and it's a crazy thought to think that you are listening to my voice in Denmark or the Philippines or countries that I don't even know where they are, to be honest. But God has called you to that place. Wherever you are today, wherever your feet touch the ground today, that is the place that God has called you to. That is where He has called you to work and serve. Whatever you're holding, whatever that space is, that is what you are called to carry. And those revelations from Scripture and from really good friends and mentors have radically changed my life. And then the third question I want you to consider is, what happens if I don't carry this? Just be honest. Look at it. My husband is really good at doing this for me because sometimes I can't see it, right? In my mind, I'm like, well, if I drop it, everything will break. They'll all come crashing down. But the reality is it? Is it really? Will that really happen? And I think behind that question, it's really fear. And it really deserves you to be honest about yourself, about your identity, about a whole bunch of things. Purpose, performance, striving, all the things. Because sometimes we carry things not because they're ours, but because we are super afraid of what will happen if we set them down. We're afraid someone's going to get hurt or angry or disappointed. And we are afraid that the relationship will change, or we're afraid that everything is going to fall apart. But here's what I've learned, friend, and I want you to hear this very gently and very kindly. If it all falls apart when you stop carrying it, it was never standing on its own in the first place. It wasn't. Now, there are some exceptions. You're a parent of small children. You got to show up every day. I know, it's hard. Food, clothing, shelter. It's hard, right? And one day they'll walk on their own, and one day they'll drive, God willing, and one day they'll go out into the world and they'll do all the things that they were meant to do. So there's a season where you have to let things go. But by and large, most things in our life apply to this scenario. Because if you're functioning as life support for something that couldn't sustain itself, then that's not faithfulness. It's not love. It's just a very slow disappearing act. And you are the star of the show. Sometimes the most faithful thing that you can do is to let something rest in God's hands instead of white-knuckling it in your own. And sometimes love looks like saying, I care very deeply about this thing, but it is not mine to hold. I'll give you a real-life example. For 15 years, I've worked in the pregnancy help ministry with some great friends. We founded a nonprofit, and for the last 8 years, I drove 2 hours. I drove an hour and 20 minutes one way, twice a week, or more, 3-4 times a week, going to the center, doing all the things. But I knew that that wasn't a sustainable strategy. There's no physical way. God called me away from that community 8 years ago. But I keep going back, holding on and holding it up and trying to secure the footing and make sure that we had a solid foundation. We had and still do have an amazing team that's there every week that works and serves and gives all of themselves to the community. They absolutely do. But it came to the point where it was time for me to let it go. And I knew enough to know that me holding on to it was doing more detriment than good. And so it was hard for me to lay it down. It was hard for me to say, you know what, this is my heart. I've been here. I know every story. I can tell you every story behind every painting and picture in every room. I can tell you why it was built the way it was, what was the heart behind it. And that took a lot of grieving and a lot of surrender. But I do know that I am not called to carry it the same way anymore. And so sometimes that's the journey that we are on. But let me tell you what shifts when you start to get really honest about what's yours. This is what happens. And I just did this. So I'm walking through this right now with myself. So I like this podcast because it's a real life. This is what's happening in my life, what's happening in yours. The first thing that happens is your energy comes back. It totally does, because you have this freedom. You can breathe again. And it's not all at once. It's not like you come out of the water and take a breath, or you've been, drowning. But it's a steady incremental increase because you're no longer pouring yourself into 100 invisible buckets. You can breathe again. You can be present again. But second, you start to feel like yourself. When you stop carrying everybody else's weight, there's finally room for your own heart to surface. And you, over time, start to remember what you care about and what you actually need, which is probably the most important thing. And then you get to see more clearly about what God has actually placed in your hands. And third, you create space for other people to step into what is their calling. And that is where it gets really beautiful. My friend Sarma wrote to me recently after hearing about the season that I was doing on a podcast, and he and I have been friends and colleagues in the U.S. Army years ago. We go back 6-7 years ago. And he said something that stopped me. He said that trust begets trust, and leading with trust does not have to be hard-nosed. And I love that because when you stop carrying what belongs to somebody else, you're not abandoning them. You're trusting them. You're saying, I believe that you can handle this. And because I believe God is at work in your life, not just in mine, I'm going to hand this to you. And here's the thing that Sarma understands. When you extend that trust, it tends to grow. People rise when you stop hovering. Relationships get healthier when you stop over-functioning. And teams get stronger when the leader isn't carrying everybody else's weight, because that's just an impossible thing to do. So, friend, that's not neglect. That's not letting go of responsibility or abandonment. That is leadership rooted in trust rather than control. And the fourth thing, and this might be the most important, is that you start to move from guilt to clarity. Because guilt will say, if I'm not holding everything, then I'm failing somebody. But clarity is going to say, I am faithfully tending what's mine, and I can trust God with the rest. So there's a story in Exodus that I keep coming back to. Moses is carrying everything, right? Every dispute, decision, every problem. From morning till night, he's exhausted and he's overwhelmed. And he probably thinks that he's being faithful by doing all of the things. Can you imagine? I can't imagine being him. And then his father-in-law, Jethro, watches this and he finally says, what are you doing? Because what this is not good. You and these people will only wear yourselves out. This work is too heavy for you and you cannot handle it alone. That's not failure. That's just setting the limits and the framework for Moses to see that he's just one man. But I love that God put this story in Scripture because it tells us something essential. Carrying everything is not faithfulness. It's not even obedience. It is a misunderstanding of what God is actually asking us to do. Because God doesn't ask us to carry everything. He doesn't. He asks us to carry what's ours and to trust Him with the rest. And when we try to carry what isn't ours, when we take on the weight that He never intended us to bear, we're not being strong, friend. We're basically saying, I don't trust anybody else with this. I don't trust the process. I don't trust you. But faithfulness isn't measured by how much we carry. It is measured by how honestly you steward what is actually in your hands. So here's what I want you to do this week. And I want you to do it somewhere quiet with a pen and a paper and maybe a cup of coffee because we love coffee. But I want you to write down everything that you're currently carrying, everything that you feel responsible for. Don't filter it out or judge it. Don't judge it. Just let it all come out and live on the page. And then I want you to go through that list and I want you to ask these 3 questions. 1, what can I actually influence? 2, what did I actually agree to? And 3, what happens if I don't carry this? Just walk it out, right? Run this scenario in your head, war game it. And I think you'll be surprised at how much you're holding that was never yours. And here's the good news. You have permission to set it down. Not because you're giving up, not because you're failing or you're walking away or you're throwing in the towel, and not because you don't love the people that are in your life, because I'm sure that you probably definitely do. But it's because you finally get clear about what's actually yours. Because when you can name what's yours and gently release what isn't, you can finally take your next faithful step from an honest place instead of an exhausted one. So before you go, if you want to know what you bring to the table when you're leading from a clear, honest place, I created a quick quiz called What's Your Leadership Superpower? It only takes a couple minutes, and you'll find the link only in today's show notes. I haven't put it out on my website or anything, so you guys get the exclusive. But I would love for you to check it out and get the results, and shoot me a note and let me know what you think. Hey friends, this is Entrusted to Lead. I'm Danita Cummins, and thanks for being here today, truly. On the next episode in this clarity season, we are talking about the discipline of subtraction and why the clarity you're looking for might not come from adding one more thing, but from strategically removing what no longer serves your mission. So don't forget to keep showing up every day because you matter. Okay, have an amazing day, friend. I'll see you later. Bye.